My name is Sophia Reyes and I'm 35 years old now. But sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I'm still that terrified 14-year-old girl in a dress that was too big for me, standing next to a man who smelled like cigarettes and cheap cologne. I was born in a small town where traditions mattered more than laws, and where fathers ruled their households with iron fists disguised as protection. My childhood wasn't terrible, not at first. My mother was gentle but submissive, teaching me to cook and clean and be a good girl from the time I could walk. We didn't have much, but we got by. Dad worked construction when jobs were available and drank when they weren't. I had dreams then. Simple dreams. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I loved animals. They were easier to understand than people, with their hidden agendas and complicated rules. I did well in school, despite my father's comments that education was wasted on girls. Everything changed when I turned 14. I still remember how the kitchen smelled that evening, beans simmering on the stove, the sharp tang of my father's beer. He had invited his friend Carlos over for dinner. Carlos was 32 years old, a business associate of my father's, though I never understood what business they were in. He'd always look at me strangely when he visited, but I'd been raised not to question adults. "Sophia," my father said, his voice unnaturally cheerful, "Carlos has something he wants to ask you." My mother's face was turned away, washing dishes with shaking hands. Carlos smiled. His teeth were stained from tobacco, and his eyes never quite met mine. "Your father and I have been talking. You're becoming a beautiful young woman, and I'd be honored to have you as my wife." I thought it was a joke at first. I was in 9th grade. I had a biology test the next day. Marriage wasn't even on my radar. But my father was nodding, grinning like he'd just closed the deal of a lifetime. And in a way he had. I later learned that Carlos had agreed to forgive my father's gambling debts, thousands of dollars, in exchange for my hand in marriage. I looked at my mother, desperately seeking intervention. She kept scrubbing the same plate, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. I'm still in school," I stammered. "I can't get married." My father's smile vanished. "This isn't a discussion, Sophia. It's already arranged. The ceremony will be small, just family. We'll say you're 18 on the paperwork." "But I'm not." His fist hit the table, making the silverware jump. "You think we can afford to send you to college? To vet school? Don't be stupid. Carlos can provide for you. He has a house, a business. You should be grateful." My mother finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Maybe we could wait until she finishes high school." "Stay out of this," my father snapped. "The decision is made." That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. I begged my mother to help me, but she just stroked my hair and whispered, "Sometimes we must accept the path that's chosen for us. Carlos isn't a bad man. He won't hurt you." But he did hurt me. Not with his fists, he was too calculating for that, but with his control, his expectations, his constant reminder that I was property, not a person. The wedding was a blur. I wore a second-hand dress my mother had altered to fit me. There were maybe 15 people there, all family or friends of my father and Carlos. No one from my school. No one questioned why a 9th grader was getting married. The official who performed the ceremony barely looked at me, accepting the forged birth certificate without comment. Carlos took me to his house after the ceremony. It was a small, tidy place on the edge of town, with sparse furniture and blank walls. "You can decorate it however you want," he told me, as if that was some grand concession. Within reason, of course. That first night, I locked myself in the bathroom until morning. He didn't force the door open, which I was grateful for, but he made it clear that my childish behavior would not be tolerated for long. I was allowed to continue school, which surprised me. "I'm not a monster," Carlos said when I asked him about it, "but you'll need to keep up with the housework too. I like dinner ready when I get home." So began my double life. At school, I pretended everything was normal. I wore concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes, and long sleeves to hide the bruises that appeared whenever I disappointed Carlos. I made excuses for why I couldn't hang out with friends after school, or participate in extracurricular activities. At home I was a wife. I cooked and cleaned and endured Carlos's advances. I learned to dissociate, to send my mind somewhere else while my body remained. I became an expert at predicting his moods, at anticipating his needs before he voiced them. My father visited occasionally, always with an outstretched hand. Carlos would slip him money, and they'd drink beer and talk like old friends while I served them food. My father never asked how I was doing, never noticed how thin I'd become, or how my hands trembled when his voice got loud. I fantasized about running away, but where would I go? I had no money, no skills, no one to help me. I was trapped, and Carlos made sure I knew it. "You're lucky," he'd tell me after we fought. "Most men wouldn't put up with your attitude. Your father warned me you were stubborn." By 16, I developed a silent efficiency that seemed to satisfy him. I maintained good grades, excellence being my only form of rebellion, and kept the house immaculate. I spoke only when spoken to around Carlos and his friends. I became invisible, a ghost haunting my own life. There was one teacher, Ms. Jacobs, who seemed to sense something was wrong. She kept me after class one day in my junior year. "Sophia, is everything okay at home?" she asked, her eyes kind but concerned. I nearly broke down then. Nearly told her everything. But Carlos's warnings echoed in my head. "If you tell anyone about our arrangement, your parents will go to jail for fraud. Is that what you want?" "Everything's fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired from studying." Ms. Jacobs didn't look convinced. She handed me a pamphlet for a women's support center. "If you ever need to talk to someone, they're very discreet." I hid the pamphlet in my calculus textbook and sometimes took it out just to stare at the number, imagining what freedom might feel like. When I was 17, I got pregnant. The morning sickness was violent, making it impossible to hide my condition. Carlos was ecstatic, telling everyone he knew that he was going to be a father. My own father congratulated him, as if creating a child with a child was something to celebrate. I lost the baby at 14 weeks. Carlos was devastated, but I felt only relief followed immediately by crushing guilt. What kind of monster was relieved to lose a baby? But I couldn't imagine bringing a child into my prison. After the miscarriage, something in me hardened. I realized I couldn't wait for rescue. I needed to save myself. I began squirreling away small amounts of money from the grocery budget, hiding it in a tampon box that Carlos would never touch. I studied harder, determined to graduate with honors and hopefully qualify for scholarships. My 18th birthday passed without celebration. Carlos forgot or perhaps didn't care. But I marked it silently, knowing that at least legally, I was now an adult with options. I graduated as valedictorian of my class. Carlos didn't attend the ceremony, he had a poker game that night, but Ms. Jacobs was there, beaming with pride as I delivered my speech about perseverance and future possibilities. If only my classmates knew how much those words meant to me. That summer, I put my plan into motion. I applied to several colleges with strong financial aid programs, using the address of a coffee shop where I'd befriended the owner. I took the SATs at a testing center 2 towns over, paying the fee with my secret savings. And then, miracle of miracles, I received a full scholarship to a university 300 miles away. When the acceptance letter arrived at the coffee shop, I cried for an hour in the bathroom. Now came the hardest part. Leaving. I knew Carlos would never simply let me go. He'd become accustomed to his young wife, his housekeeper, his possession. I considered simply disappearing, but I had no car, very little money, and I was afraid he'd track me down. So I decided on a half-truth. "I've been accepted to community college," I told him over dinner one night, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "It's a 2-year program in business administration. I could help you with your company accounts." Carlos frowned. "We've never discussed this. Who's going to take care of the house?" "I'd still do everything I do now," I assured him quickly. "Classes would only be part-time, and I'd be more valuable to you with education." He seemed to consider this, chewing slowly. "Where is this college?" "About 20 miles north," I lied. "I can take the bus." After a long silence, he nodded. "We'll try it for 1 semester. If your housework suffers or your attitude changes, you're done." "Understood." I nodded, hardly believing it had worked. The next few weeks were a careful dance of preparation. I secretly shipped small boxes of essentials to my new university address. I memorized bus schedules and planned my escape down to the minute. The day before I was set to leave, Carlos announced he'd be going on a fishing trip with friends. It was as if the universe was finally taking pity on me. With him gone, I could leave without confrontation. That night I wrote 2 letters. One to my mother, telling her I was safe but not where I was going. And one to Carlos, simply stating that our marriage was over and asking him not to look for me. The next morning, I took only what I could carry in one suitcase and a backpack. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen table beside Carlos's letter. I didn't look back as I walked to the bus station, terror and exhilaration battling in my chest. The first year of college was both wonderful and overwhelming. I kept expecting Carlos to appear at any moment, to drag me back to my prison. I jumped at loud noises and struggled to make friends. But slowly, painfully, I began to build a life. I legally changed my last name. I got therapy through the university's counseling center. I worked part-time jobs and studied relentlessly. I discovered who Sophia could be when she wasn't terrified and controlled. I heard through my mother that Carlos had been furious, that he'd threatened to find me. But over time the threats subsided. He found another young woman to marry, from what I heard. I prayed for her but knew I couldn't save her. My mother never revealed my location to my father or Carlos, which was her one small act of courage. We maintained sporadic contact through a dedicated email address I set up. She told me my father forbade anyone from speaking my name in their house. I graduated with honors and went on to get my master's degree in social work. I wanted to help other women and girls who were trapped as I had been. I moved to a large city several states away, where anonymity offered another layer of protection. By my late 20s I had built a career, made friends, even cautiously began dating. I filed for divorce from Carlos, using an attorney who specialized in domestic violence cases. The process was complicated by my having been underage at the time of marriage, but eventually I was legally free. I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever. Then 2 weeks ago my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Something made me answer it. Sophia. It was my mother's voice, older and more frail than I remembered. It's been so long. Mom? Is everything okay? We hadn't spoken by phone in years, preferring the safety of email. It's your father, she said, her voice breaking. He's had a stroke. He's asking for you. I felt nothing at first, then a curious mixture of vindication and ancient grief. Why would he ask for me? He disowned me. Things are bad, Sophia. The medical bills. We're losing the house. He gambled away his pension years ago. He can't work anymore. She paused. He knows you have a good job now. And there it was. After all these years, all the pain he'd caused, my father wanted money. I'm sorry, Mom. I truly am. But I can't help him. He's still your father, she whispered. A father who sold me to pay his gambling debts. I reminded her, surprised by how steady my voice remained. A father who let a grown man take his 14-year-old daughter. He made mistakes. No, Mom. Mistakes are forgotten birthdays or missed soccer games. What he did was a crime. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she sighed. He wants to see you. To apologize, he says. I almost laughed. After 21 years, now he wants to apologize? Now that he needs something from me. Please just think about it, she begged. He doesn't have much time left. Against my better judgment, against the advice of my therapist, I agreed to think about it. And for days I could think of little else. My carefully constructed peace was shattered by memories I'd worked so hard to bury. My life partner Alejandro noticed my distraction. We'd been together for 5 years, built on a foundation of honesty and respect. He knew my history had held me through nightmares and panic attacks. Whatever you decide, he told me, holding my hand across our dinner table, I'll support you. But don't do anything that will set back your healing. After a week of sleepless nights, I made my decision. I would see my father one last time, not for his sake but for mine. To look him in the eye as the woman I'd become, not the girl he'd sacrificed. I arranged to visit my hometown the following weekend. Alejandro offered to come with me, but this was a journey I needed to make alone. The bus ride to my hometown was surreal. Everything looked smaller, shabbier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing it through adult eyes without the fog of childhood. My mother met me at the station. She had aged dramatically, her once black hair now completely gray, her posture stooped. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her lined face. You look so beautiful, she kept saying. So strong. How is he? I asked as we walked to her car, the same ancient sedan from my childhood. Weak. Angry. She sighed. The doctors say he should be in a nursing facility, but we can't afford it. And that's why he suddenly remembered he has a daughter? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. My mother didn't answer directly. He's changed, Sophia. Suffering does that to people. So does accountability, I replied quietly. The house was exactly as I remembered it, though the paint was peeling and the yard overgrown. My heart raced as we approached the front door. Part of me wanted to run to get back on the bus and return to the safety of my real life. But I had come this far. I needed closure. The smell hit me first: medication, unwashed bodies, and the lingering aroma of too many cigarettes smoked over too many years. My father was in a hospital bed set up in the living room, oxygen tubes in his nose. His once powerful frame withered. When he saw me, his roomy eyes widened. Sophia. His voice was a rasp. I stood at the foot of his bed, keeping my distance. Hello, Dad. He tried to sit up straighter but didn't have the strength. You came. Mom said you wanted to see me. An awkward silence fell between us. What do you say to the man who traded you like property? Who robbed you of your childhood? Who never once tried to find you or apologize until he needed something? You look good, he finally said. Successful. I am successful, I confirmed. No thanks to you. He flinched, then had the audacity to look wounded. I always wanted what was best for you. I couldn't hold back a harsh laugh. Is that what you tell yourself? That marrying me off to a man twice my age when I was 14 was what was best for me. Carlos was established. He could provide. Carlos was a predator, and you were his enabler. My voice was shaking now, years of repressed rage bubbling to the surface. You didn't care what happened to me as long as your gambling debts were paid. My mother touched my arm. Sophia, please. He's sick. And I'm supposed to forget what he did because of that? I pulled away from her. Do you have any idea what my life was like with Carlos? Do you know what it's like to be a child bride? To have your education, your future, your body controlled by a man you're terrified of. My father's face had gone ashen. I didn't think. That's right. You didn't think. You didn't care. I was just a commodity to be traded. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Why did you really want to see me, Dad? Because I doubt it was to apologize. He looked away, confirming my suspicions. My mother answered for him. The medical bills are overwhelming. The house is in foreclosure. We have nowhere to go. And you thought I'd open my checkbook after everything you put me through? I asked, incredulous. Family helps family, my father mumbled. Family. I repeated. You forfeited the right to call me family when you signed those fraudulent marriage papers. When you let a man take a child as his wife to clear your debts. I made mistakes, he admitted. I was desperate. So am I supposed to be your retirement plan now? Your safety net? He didn't deny it. You always were the smart one. Got yourself educated, a good job. Yes, I did. Despite you, not because of you. I looked around the cluttered living room, at the overdue bills stacked on the coffee table. How much do you need? Hope flickered in his eyes. The medical bills are almost $30,000. The mortgage is behind by. I held up a hand to stop him. I'm not giving you money. His face darkened. Then why did you even come? Closure, I said simply. And to tell you that you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Lawyer? My mother echoed, confused. Yes. I've been in therapy for years dealing with the trauma of what you both allowed to happen to me. My therapist has encouraged me to seek legal justice. There's no statute of limitations on what you did. My father's face contorted with rage, then fear. You wouldn't. I already have. My lawyer will be contacting local authorities this week with evidence of the fraudulent marriage, including testimony from my former teacher, who suspected but couldn't prove anything at the time. You'd send your own parents to jail? My father's voice rose, triggering a coughing fit. I'm not doing this out of vengeance, I explained calmly. I'm doing it because there must be consequences. Because you're still not sorry for what you did. You're only sorry it's not continuing to benefit you. I turned to my mother. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you were a victim too in many ways. But you stood by and let it happen. Tears streamed down her face. What will happen to us? That's not my concern anymore. I took a step back. I've spent years rebuilding myself from the broken girl you both abandoned to a predator. I won't let you tear down what I've built. Please, my father wheezed. I'm begging you. It was strange to see him beg, this man who had ruled with absolute authority. But I felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for the father he could have been, for the family we might have had. Goodbye, Dad. I walked to the door then paused. For what it's worth, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean there aren't consequences. I left the house to my mother's sobs and my father's shouts. I didn't look back as I walked to the bus station, just as I hadn't looked back when I'd escaped Carlos. As the bus pulled away from my hometown, I felt lighter somehow. I'd faced my past and remained standing. The scared girl was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Alejandro. How did it go? Are you okay? I smiled as I typed my response. It went exactly as it needed to. And yes, I'm more than okay. For the first time in 21 years, I truly believe that was true. I spent the 4-hour bus ride back to my city alternating between numbness and relief. When I finally got back to the apartment I shared with Alejandro, he was waiting with dinner ready and concern in his eyes. You didn't have to cook, I said, dropping my overnight bag at the door. I needed something to do with my hands. He pulled me into a gentle hug. I've been worried about you. The warmth of his embrace nearly undid me. How different my life could have been if I'd known this kind of love from the beginning. A love that built up rather than tore down. We sat at our small dining table, and I recounted the confrontation with my father as Alejandro listened without interruption. Unlike Carlos, who would cut me off mid-sentence if he deemed my words unimportant, Alejandro gave me the space to process my thoughts out loud. Do you really have a lawyer? He asked when I finished. I nodded. I consulted with Diane last year. She specializes in cases like mine. Diane was a fierce attorney I'd met through my work at the women's shelter. She had helped dozens of women escape situations similar to mine, and had a particular interest in child marriage cases. And you're sure about this? Alejandro's question held no judgment, only support. I've been sure for a long time, I admitted. I just needed the courage to follow through. I picked at my food, appetite diminished by the day's emotional toll. All these years I've helped other women seek justice while being too afraid to seek it for myself. It felt hypocritical. You weren't ready, he said simply. Now you are. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, as though confronting my father had lanced a festering wound. The next morning I called Diane. I'm ready, I told her. I want to move forward with the case. Are you prepared for what that might entail? Diane's voice was gentle but firm. It won't be easy, Sophia. Your parents could face serious charges. Your ex-husband too. I understand. And I did. Better than most, I understood the consequences of choices, both those made for us and those we make ourselves. Diane arranged a meeting for later that week to discuss strategy. In the meantime, I tried to return to my normal routine: counseling sessions at the shelter, dinner with Alejandro, yoga classes that helped keep the anxiety at bay. But 2 days after my return, my mother called again. Your father's in the hospital, she said without preamble. He had another stroke after you left. A bad one. My hand tightened around the phone. I'm sorry to hear that. The doctors say. Her voice broke. They don't think he'll recover this time. I closed my eyes, absorbing the information. What are you asking of me, Mom? Come say goodbye, she whispered. Whatever he did, he's still your father. The request hung heavy between us. Part of me, the wounded child who still craved parental love despite everything, wanted to go. But the woman I'd become, the one who'd fought so hard for her freedom and sanity, knew better. I said my goodbyes the other day. I told her softly, I won't be coming back. Her sob tore at my heart. He's asking for you. He says he has things to tell you. It's too late for that. Please, Sophia. If not for him, then for me. I sighed. My mother had been both victim and enabler in my story. She'd failed to protect me, But she'd also been trapped in her own way, beaten down by years of my father's emotional abuse. "I'll think about it," I conceded, knowing even as I said it that I wouldn't go. Some wounds were too deep, some bridges irreparably burned. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen counter staring at nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. An image of my father in a hospital bed, tubes and wires everywhere with the caption, "He's asking for you." I deleted it without responding. The meeting with Diane was set for Friday afternoon. I took the day off work, too distracted to be effective with my clients. Alejandro offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. Diane's office was warm and inviting, decorated with artwork from survivors of domestic violence. She greeted me with a firm handshake and clear eyes that missed nothing. "You look different," she observed as we sat down. "More certain." "I am." I handed her a folder containing everything I'd gathered over the years, my original birth certificate, photos from my wedding, diary entries from my time with Carlos, medical records from my miscarriage that listed my age as 17 while noting I was married. "I want them held accountable." Diane reviewed the documents carefully. "This is good, Sophia. With your testimony in these records, we have a strong case against both your father and Carlos for statutory rape, child endangerment, falsifying documents, and more." "And my mother?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Diane looked at me with compassion. "She could be charged as an accomplice. But depending on her level of cooperation and your wishes, we might be able to work out a deal." I nodded, conflicted. My mother had failed me, but she'd also been a victim of my father's manipulation. "There's something else you should know," Diane said, closing the folder. "Cases like these can get media attention. Are you prepared for that possibility? For your story to become public?" I hadn't considered that aspect. The thought of strangers knowing my most painful experiences made my stomach churn. But then I thought of other girls, trapped as I had been, who might see my story and find hope. If it helps even one girl escape a situation like mine, then yes, I'm prepared. Diane smiled. "That's why I took your case pro bono. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for all the girls who don't know they have options." We spent the next 2 hours outlining next steps. Diane would file initial paperwork the following week. She would also contact Ms. Jacobs, my former teacher, to see if she would testify. As I left her office, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. "Is this Sophia?" A man's voice, vaguely familiar. "Who's asking?" I replied cautiously. "It's Carlos. Carlos Mendez." My blood turned to ice. I stopped walking, frozen in the middle of the sidewalk as pedestrians flowed around me. "How did you get this number?" My voice didn't sound like my own. "Your mother gave it to me." He paused. "She called me when your father went into the hospital. She thought I might be able to convince you to come." Of course she had. My mother had always seen Carlos as my legitimate husband, our age difference merely an inconvenient detail. "I have nothing to say to you," I managed. "Sophia, listen." His voice had the same commanding tone I remembered, though age had roughened it. "Your father is dying. Whatever issues you have with him, with us, this is the time to resolve them." "Issues?" I repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call statutory rape and forced marriage?" "Issues." Carlos sighed heavily. "That was a different time, a different culture. You were young, but you were mature for your age." The familiar justification made bile rise in my throat. I was 14, Carlos. A child. No amount of maturity changes that. "Look, I didn't call to argue about the past. What's done is done." His tone shifted to one I recognized all too well, reasonable, persuasive, the voice he used when trying to manipulate me. "Your mother is alone. Your father's medical bills are destroying them. You have the means to help." And there it was. Not concern for my welfare or remorse for his actions, but a financial agenda, just like my father. "Let me make something abundantly clear," I said, finding strength in my fury. "I owe none of you anything. Not my time, not my forgiveness, and certainly not my money." "You always were stubborn," he muttered. "This isn't just about money. Your father has regrets. He wants to make peace before he dies. Then he should make peace with himself, because I'm not available for his deathbed absolution." I took a deep breath. And Carlos? You should start setting aside money for a good criminal defense attorney. What are you talking about? You'll find out. I ended the call and blocked his number. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on a nearby bench. Hearing Carlos's voice had catapulted me back to that trapped, terrified teenager. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I called Diane immediately. Carlos just contacted me. I told her when she answered. My mother gave him my number. Diane's response was immediate. We can file for a protective order today. I'll have the paperwork ready in an hour. Can you come back to the office? On my way. The temporary restraining order was granted that afternoon. It prohibited Carlos from contacting me in any way, directly or through third parties. It wouldn't stop him if he was determined, but it established a legal boundary that would have consequences if violated. I also asked Diane to pursue one against my mother, which was a more complicated decision. But her sharing my contact information with Carlos had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. That evening, Alejandro and I sat on our balcony, watching the city lights come on as dusk settled. I've been thinking, I said after a long silence, maybe it's time for a change. He looked at me questioningly. What kind of change? I got a job offer last month from a shelter in Seattle. I turned it down because I didn't want to uproot our lives, but now you're reconsidering, he finished for me. I nodded. With everything that's happening, with Carlos knowing where I am, maybe a fresh start would be good. Alejandro took my hand. What about your clients here? Your friends. I can refer my clients to other counselors. And real friends understand sometimes you need to do what's best for your mental health. I looked at him anxiously. I know it's a lot to ask you to move across the country with me, Sophia. He smiled that gentle smile that had first drawn me to him. Home isn't a place for me. It's wherever you are. If Seattle is what you need, then Seattle is where we'll go. Tears pricked my eyes. I don't deserve you. Stop that. His voice was firm. You deserve everything good in this world. I wish you could see yourself through my eyes. How strong you are. How compassionate despite everything you've endured. I leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I'll call about the job tomorrow. The Seattle position was still open, and they were thrilled when I reached out to accept it. The director, Jasmine, had been trying to recruit me for years, impressed by the program I developed for teenage survivors of domestic violence. The apartment comes with the job, she reminded me, and we can help with relocation expenses. It felt like the universe was aligning to support my decision. We set a move date for the end of the month, giving us 3 weeks to pack up our lives. I gave notice at work, began transferring my clients to colleagues, and started the process of saying goodbye to the city that had been my sanctuary for so long. 5 days after my confrontation with my father, my mother called again. I almost didn't answer, but worry gnawed at me. He's gone, she said simply. This morning. I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. I'm sorry, Mom. And I was sorry for the father I never had, for the family that could have been, for the love that had been twisted into something unrecognizable. The funeral is on Saturday, she continued, her voice eerily calm. Will you come? I closed my eyes. No, I can't do that. He was your father, Sophia. A thread of steel entered her tone. Whatever happened between you was not just between us. I cut in. It was criminal. It was abuse. And I won't pretend otherwise, even in death. So that's it? You're just going to abandon me now that he's gone? The guilt trip was familiar territory. Mom, I haven't lived at home for 17 years. I've built my own life, a good life. That's not abandonment. It's survival. And what am I supposed to do? Her voice cracked. The house will be foreclosed on next month. I have nowhere to go, no money. The responsibility felt heavy on my shoulders. Despite everything, she was still my mother. But I'd learned the hard way that I couldn't set myself on fire to keep others warm. There are resources, I said gently. Shelters for women in your situation. Programs to help with housing and job training. I can send you information. A shelter. She sounded horrified. At my age? After 40 years of marriage. Better late than never to start over, I told her. I did it at 18. She was silent for a long moment. Your father left something for you. A letter. He wrote it the night before. Before the end. My chest tightened. You can mail it to me. Don't you want to know what it says? Not particularly. The words came out harsher than intended. But I'll read it. After we hung up, I sat motionless, processing the strange emptiness I felt. My father's death should have affected me more profoundly, shouldn't it? But the truth was I'd mourned him years ago. Mourned the father he should have been. The one who would have protected rather than exploited me. Alejandro found me still sitting there when he got home from work. You okay? He asked, crouching in front of me. My father died. The words felt oddly distant, as if I were talking about a stranger. Alejandro took my hands in his. I'm sorry, Sophia. Whatever he did, I know this must be complicated for you. That's just it. It's not as complicated as it should be. I looked at him, trying to articulate the hollow feeling. I feel relieved. And guilty for feeling relieved. And angry that even in death, he's making me feel guilty. All those feelings are valid. Alejandro's PhD in psychology made him particularly insightful about emotional complexities. There's no right way to feel when an abuser dies. That night, I dreamt of my father, not as the frail man in the hospital bed, but as the towering figure of my childhood, his voice thundering through our small house. In the dream, I stood before him, no longer small and frightened but tall and strong, meeting his gaze without flinching. You have no power over me anymore, I told him. He seemed to diminish with each word, shrinking until he was nothing but a shadow, and then not even that. I woke feeling lighter somehow, as though something that had been coiled tightly within me for decades had finally begun to unwind. The letter from my father arrived 3 days later, a single page in a shaky hand I barely recognized. Sophia, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The doctors say days, maybe hours. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you. Not just the marriage, though God knows that was unforgivable, but all of it. The controlling, the drinking, the gambling that put us in that position in the first place. When you were born, I held you and promised to protect you from all the bad things in this world. Instead, I became one of those bad things. There's no excuse, though I've spent years making them up in my head. Your mother will be alone now. She's not blameless, but she was afraid of me too. Be kinder to her than I was. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Some things are beyond that. But I am sorry, Sophia. Truly sorry. You deserved a father who cherished you. I wish I could have been that man. Dad. I read it twice, then set it aside, unsure what to feel. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation? Did it matter? Did his deathbed regret change anything about the life I'd been forced to live? I folded the letter and put it in my keepsake box along with the pamphlet Miss Jacobs had given me all those years ago. Small talismans of my journey. The next week was a whirlwind of packing and goodbyes. Diane assured me the case could proceed with me in Seattle. Most of her work would be document-based for the first few months anyway. And Carlos? I asked during our final in-person meeting. What about the restraining order once I move? I've already filed paperwork for a permanent order, she explained. And we'll make sure it's enforceable in Washington state as well. He won't be able to follow you there legally. I nodded, relieved. And my mother? Diane hesitated. That's up to you, Sophia. The temporary order expires next week. Do you want to extend it? I thought about my mother's situation. Alone, facing homelessness, grieving in her own way. No. But I don't want her to have my new address either. That's reasonable, Diane agreed. She can contact you through my office if necessary. 2 days before our move, my phone rang with another unknown number. Cautious but curious, I answered. Sophia Reyes? A man's voice unfamiliar. Yes, who's calling? This is Detective Alvarez with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling regarding Carlos Mendez. My stomach dropped. What about him? We've received your complaint and supporting documentation from your attorney. I'd like to set up a time to take your formal statement. The wheels of justice turning at last. I'm moving to Seattle in 2 days, I told him. Can we do it before then? We arranged for me to come to the station that afternoon. Alejandro offered to accompany me, but this was something I needed to do alone. The detective was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He took me to a small interview room and spent nearly 3 hours taking my statement, asking questions with a sensitivity that suggested he'd dealt with cases like mine before. You know, he said as we finished, most people in your situation never report. The shame, the family connections, the years that have passed. It all works against them. I almost didn't, I admitted. For years, I just wanted to forget. He nodded understanding. What changed? I thought about it. I realized that forgetting wasn't working. That as long as I stayed silent, they still had power over me. Your testimony is compelling, Detective Alvarez told me, and the documentation backs it up. We'll be moving forward with the investigation. Even though I'll be in Seattle, distance isn't an obstacle. We can arrange video testimony if needed. He closed his notebook. You should know that we picked up Carlos Mendez this morning for questioning. Based on preliminary findings, we expect to file charges. A wave of emotions washed over me: vindication, fear, a strange sort of peace. What about my mother? That's more complicated. The detective's expression softened. Given her cooperation and your statement about the coercive control your father exercised, she may face lesser charges. But I can't make any promises. I nodded, understanding the complexities. Thank you for taking this seriously. For believing me. It's my job to believe evidence, he replied simply. And yours is overwhelming. As I left the station, my phone buzzed with a text from my former coworker. Asterisk, your mother is at the shelter asking for you. What do you want me to do? Asterisk. I stared at the message, conflicted. After a moment's consideration, I replied. Asterisk, tell her I'm safe but I need space. Give her information about senior housing assistance. Asterisk. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it wasn't abandonment either. It was boundary setting, something I'd had to learn the hard way. Our last night in the apartment was bittersweet. Boxes surrounded us, our lives packed away except for essentials. We sat on the floor with takeout and cheap wine, toasting to new beginnings. Are you scared? Alejandro asked. Terrified, I admitted with a laugh. But it's a good kind of terrified. Like standing on the edge of something wonderful. He raised his plastic cup. To facing our fears. And to leaving the past where it belongs, I added. Behind us. Just before midnight, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Diane. Asterisk, Carlos Mendez was formally arrested today. Charges include statutory rape, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and fraud. Bail hearing tomorrow. Your statement was crucial. We're moving forward with the case against your father's estate as well. Your mother has agreed to testify. Call me when you're settled in Seattle. Asterisk. I showed the email to Alejandro, my hands shaking. How do you feel? He asked quietly. Like I can finally breathe, I replied. Like it wasn't all for nothing. He pulled me close. It wasn't for nothing. Look at the work you do, the lives you've changed. Look at us, at what we've built together. None of that would exist if you hadn't found the courage to leave. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if nature herself approved of our new direction. We loaded the last of our things into the moving truck, and took one final walk through the empty apartment. Ready? Alejandro asked, standing at the door. I looked around at the space that had been my safe haven for so many years. I'd arrived here broken and afraid, certain that happiness was something that happened to other people. I was leaving whole, loved, and looking toward the future rather than running from the past. Ready, I confirmed, taking his hand. As we drove away, I didn't look back. I'd spent too many years looking back, letting the shadows of yesterday dim the light of today. Seattle wasn't just a new job or a new apartment. It was a declaration that my story wasn't finished being written. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Asterisk, it's Mom. Detective gave me your new number. I'm testifying against Carlos. I know it's too little too late. I'm sorry. Asterisk. I stared at the message, emotions warring within me. Finally I typed. Asterisk, it's not too late to do the right thing. I hope you find peace. Asterisk. I didn't add I love you, or I forgive you. Those feelings might come with time or they might not. What mattered was that I was no longer allowing guilt or obligation to dictate my responses. 6 hours into our drive, we stopped at a scenic overlook. The landscape stretched before us, mountains in the distance, the road winding ahead like a promise. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your father hadn't made that deal with Carlos? Alejandro asked as we stood looking out at the view. Where you'd be now? I considered the question. Sometimes. But then I think about the women I've helped because I understand their pain from the inside. The programs I've developed because I know exactly what survivors need. I turn to face him. And I think about us. How appreciative I am of your kindness, your respect, because I know what it's like to live without those things. So in some twisted way you're grateful? Not for what they did, I clarified. Never for that. But for the person I became in spite of it. For the strength I found because I had to. Alejandro smiled. That's what I love most about you. Your ability to find meaning even in the darkest experiences. As we got back in the car to continue our journey, I felt a sense of completion. My father was gone. Carlos would face justice. My mother was taking her first tentative steps toward accountability. And I was moving forward, not defined by what had been done to me, but by what I had done with the life I'd fought so hard to reclaim. My name is Sofia Reyes. I'm 35 years old, and my story is just beginning.